Hi, this is Marika, and welcome to lesson one of my watercolor beginner series. Now, previous to this lesson, I had some information about paints, paper, brushes that you can get. So, check out those three videos if you haven't done it yet. But today's is going to be a proper lesson in watercolor, and we are going to cover some important things that you need to know as a beginner. You have all those things ready, but what do you actually do? How do you start with watercolor? So let me answer those things for you today. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to quickly have a look at our color theory. Now, when I started my journey with watercolor, I didn't give this much attention. And it's okay if you don't want to go into the depth of it, but I am going to just highlight some things for you that you might find interesting in your painting journey. Now, if you have a look at this poster that I made, you can first of all see that it's saying these are your cool colors and your warm colors. So often we would have a look at our paintings and we would decide whether we wanted to have a more cool feeling or warm feeling, but each color can also have a cool or warm tone. For example, if you have blue and you add a bit more red to it, a tiny bit, you can give it a warmer feel. If you add too much, obviously you're going to get purple. This is how we can kind of mix our colors and have a look at what tone we want in our painting, whether we want it cool or warm. Some other things that I want to highlight to you, you can see that it says here, how do you create harmony in your art with monochromatic paint? And that's our task 3 for today, is to do monochromatic mountains. So using one color only, but different values of it. So whether we add more water or add more paint. Analogous, so that is the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. They create harmonies in your painting. So purple and pink, purple and blue, and so on. So whatever is next to each other. And then your complementary colors across from each other. Now, the complementary colors are what we also use for shadows in watercolor as an underpainting. Underpainting meaning I paint that color first, so I paint my shadow first, then I paint the actual thing, and then I add more pigment of that color in a more pigment ratio as well. So, for example, if you're painting a tomato, you can start your tomato by painting a green where your shadows would be in your tomato, then go over with your red with a lighter value, and then move up to a darker value red for your shadow. So that's how we layer in watercolor, and that's why it's good to know your color wheel just a tiny bit. Excuse me. Just so that you know uh, how to reference and which shadow colors to use, because that to me in the beginning was very confusing. And I would use things like blue because I used to do acrylic painting, so I would use blue for my shadows, but then obviously your yellows become green and it just becomes a mess sometimes, depending on the colors that you use. Sometimes your blues are still great for shadows, especially if you want a vintage feel. So this isn't set in stone, but it is for you to know about it and to have a reference for it. Now, as I said, we're going to do some monochromatic painting today in task 3. I also want to just quickly explain these 3 things down here. So first of all, your hue is where the color is in your color wheel. As you can see here, we have our whole comparison, and where is green, for example, this green is more towards the yellow, this green is more towards blue. Intensity, how much pigment is in the color. So if you look to the top, that's more of your pigmented, higher intensity color. And then value, we look at how light or how dark something is, and under that you have your tone and shade for it. So if you're doing a tomato, you'll do your underpainting with a green color, and then you might do your tomato color over here with this value, and then you might do a shadow with a darker value. Okay, so just to give you a bit of background so that you understand how this fits into what we are doing today and into what we are going to do throughout this course. So there will be 12 lessons in this course. Today is lesson 1, and today we are going to cover washes, your basic watercolor washes, and then there will be 3 tasks that we do together. So you have your paints ready. Let me just go through what I have on my table today. I have some watercolor paper that I have given masking tape over. I'm just going to press record here so that you can see my table. There we go. So I have my paper and masking tape on it already. I have my paints and I'm going to quickly activate them. So to activate them, I just spray them with water, and that activates the pigment in the paint. You can also just use a syringe or a brush and drop some water on the colors that you're going to use, but have them, a spray bottle helps just to have them all nice and wet and ready for you to use whichever color you want to use. I have a pencil to do some sketching with. I have a palette. So as you can see, there's some empty spaces, and that's the ones I'm going to use today. Normally, I leave my paint that I used in them. I don't always clean it out every single time because I might just add some more water to this and I can use that paint again. So don't waste it. You can definitely reuse your paint, your mixes, everything that you've got on your mixing palette. I also use a ceramic one because I feel they hold the paints better, and you can also see the color or the value a little bit better on a ceramic palette. I have a microfiber cloth over here, so I use this instead of paper towel because you can just wash it and you reuse it. Paper towel I'll only use when I'm doing, for example, clouds and I want to have certain textures in my clouds, then I'll use paper towel, but most of the time I'm using my microfiber cloth. I have 2 water jugs over here. So this one I use for clean water and this one I use for dirty water. When I am painting, I would first dip my brush in this one, clean it on the cloth, and then go into this one for when I need clean water. That ensures that your mixes stay clean and you always have clean water ready to use. Today we are going to start with 4 different washes. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do each wash, because just like anything in life, there are different ways to tackle a situation. First of all, I'm going to you can maybe do this in a sketchbook or on an A4 page. I've got an A3 paper here that I divided into 2 so that I can do my one task and then the other task all on one page. So I'm just going to divide this paper into blocks. Okay. Hopefully I can zoom this in for you so that you can have a closer look. They are not even, I know that. This side I'm going to work wet on wet. And this side I'm going to work wet on dry. Now, the washes we are going to do, and I'm doing them both sides. The first one is a flat wash. The second one is a graded wash. The third one is a variegated wash. And for the fourth one, I'm going to drop paint, wet paint, into wet paint. and then wet into dry. And we will see the different effects that makes. So let's start with the first one, wet on wet. So the first thing I am going to do is I am going to mix the color here for me. Let's go for purple today. So how do you mix color? This is what you always do when you're painting watercolor. You will wet your brush and then stroke that color a couple of times. Put it down in your palette and then add water. If you use a bigger brush for this step, it helps to pick up more water easily. Then I'll just go and get more pigment and that should be fine. So I'm going to mix 3 different colors. Let's go for a red maybe. And then I'll go for a blue. You can pick any 3 colors that you'd like. It's important to practice these washes a little bit until you get them right, because we use a lot of these for skies and for just painting in general. So if you can, these are great exercises to do to just practice the control of your brush, of the pigment. Okay, I'm just putting this aside. Let's start with the flat wash, wet on wet. First, I'm going to wet my block. So I'm painting it with water. That's what I mean when I say I wet it. I paint it with water. Now I go into my color and I'm doing a flat wash, so I want the whole area to be the same color. So I go into my purple, I start painting it here at the top. And then I just move that pigment down. Working wet on wet is a bit more chaotic sometimes, but it's also a bit forgiving. Doesn't give you harsh lines. And you can play with the pigment and move it around as you like. I'm just drying my brush in between so that I can lift up some of this paint over here. And I'm just painting it from the top again all the way down. Giving it a nice flat wash. Some more color here at the bottom. So just practice that. Pause the video here and see if you can get a nice flat wash, one color all the way through. Now let's do exactly the same technique, but without painting with water first. So without wetting our paper first, I'm just going into the color directly and I'm painting it onto the paper. Now, as my brush gets dry, I'm going to wet my brush and paint with water. Add some more color if you need to. So I'm going to grab some pigment here, add some more color. So we want it to be the same color all the way through. So sometimes with wet on dry, you can see it comes out a bit darker. You can add more water to that. You can lift up some of the paint. So there's a nice flat wash. Two different techniques giving you the same outcome in the end. Okay, let's do a graded wash. So graded wash means it starts dark at the top or at the bottom and it goes lighter as it goes on. Now this we often use for painting the sky, for example. First we're doing wet on wet. So I am going into my clean water and I'm painting only with water. Now I'm going to go into my blue and I'm starting at the top and I'm just going to work my way down, not picking up more paint, just letting that paint run out to the bottom. Clean my brush and lift up some of this paint on the bottom just so that we have a nice graded wash. You can add more color in the top if you want. Okay. Let's do the same wet on dry. This time I'm going into my paint directly, starting at the top. And then I'll clean my brush here, get some clean water, and just paint with water to the bottom. Now you will see my pen, I'm painting over the pen here, and it's not runny. That's because this is a waterproof pen. And they are great to have for if you want to do line and wash type of things. There we go. Graded wash. I'll put links for all these things in the description, including the color wheel. I will have a PDF document linking to my website for it. Variegated wash is where we use two different colors that we are going to basically do a graded wash of the one from the top and a graded wash of the other from the bottom. So I'll do blue and red and see how we go. So first I need to wet my paper. Clean water, paint only with water for wet on wet. Start with the red and I'm going from the top. I clean my brush so that it's less water. It's sort of a graded wash going all the way down. Now I take my blue and I go from the bottom. And you want to let them meet and sort of go over each other just a tiny bit, blending into each other. So I have my blue. I'll start with the blue at the top this time. I have some water. Okay, let's get the red. Move it up. Clean your brush. Some clean water. Let them blend into each other. So you'll often do a sky with one of these two methods. For example, having blue and a yellow ochre at the bottom. Do you see this line my graded wash has made here? Now we can fix this. It's just because maybe I added a bit too much water. So I'm just going to clean my brush, and then with a bit of water, tiny bit of water, just go over it a couple of times. So don't be discouraged if you see little things happening that you don't understand, or that you don't know whether you can fix it. In the beginning, I didn't know we can fix things in watercolor, and I spent wasting a lot of paper and paint because I just thought it was ruined. Okay, so just continue to add water with your dry brush, going over it. And I'll do the same here. It's because we're adding the water after. And just your paper, of course, makes a big difference. I'm using the back of something that I've painted, so it could be that my paper is just a bit not too great at the moment, but we can work with it. Work with what you have. Okay. And now the last one is wet in wet or wet in dry. So I am going to, let's do purple on this side. Whoopsie, first wet my page. So I'm just painting just with water. And then I am, you see, I'm not going back and fix it. I think my brush was too wet. Now I'm just going to paint one color on this side. So just a flat wash. And then I'm going to drop in a different color. Drop in, I mean, I pick up some of that color and I literally just make little dots with it. Even just water droplets is great to make into a color. Okay, and then wet in dry. I don't think they call it wet in dry. I just want to show you the difference between these two and what it could look like. So let's do a flat wash. So now a flat wash wet on dry is obviously a lot drier than wet and wet. So see how different it reacts when I now drop in paint. So that's our first task, is to do these 4 washes and to practice them. Whoopsie, don't mess water on your paper. And to practice them in different ways. So wet on wet and wet on dry. This will give you great control over your brush and your pigments and your paint. So give it a go and try. And let's get ready for our second task that I would like you to do as a new watercolor artist. Now, task 2 that I want you to do is one that I'm not going to do with you, but I do encourage you to really make it happen for yourself. What you need to do is to make a swatch of your paint palette. So if this, for example, is your paint palette, what I mean by a swatch is to literally measure how big the lid is, and then I want you to draw little blocks corresponding each of these colors and leave a tiny bit of space underneath it where you can write the name, tiny, tiny. And then go and do either a flat wash or a graded wash in each little block of each color. Doing a graded wash shows you the values, the light and the dark of that color. I normally just do a flat wash because I just want to see what color it actually is. The reason we do that is because, for example, look at all the greens and all the blues. And yes, of course, you can see what they look like. But here, for example, I have a swatch of this one that I've just shown you. Okay. And just look at the different colors in the blues and the greens. So if I'm looking to do, for example, the sky, I can have a look at what color the sky really is today, or what color I want it to be. With the ocean, for example, greens for your trees. So if you look at this, it doesn't always correspond with exactly the colors that you have there. So it's really good to swatch your paints and then to cut it out, which I'll do with this one later on. Cut it out and paste it into your little tin, or just have it ready, have it with you so that you can always reference to it. Now, with mine, I have a lot of my swatches up there at the back against my wall where I can see them. But for some of my little smaller ones, I just do a quick swatch like this. I've kept the names on here, so I didn't put the names on there as well. I'm just trying to see if I have. So even my little travel set that I've got here, I have made a little tiny swatch for it, and I've put the names here at the bottom. So why do I put the names? Because if you're doing tutorials and they tell you to do Payne's Gray, for example, you can have a look which one is Payne's Gray. Or if that little cake, as they call it, or that pan becomes empty, you can always refill it either with a tube of color or buying that, just that one that you need. So it's super important to do the swatch for a lot of reasons, and that is your task. So I want you to pause here the video and do your swatch quickly, because this will really help you for referencing. Look at all the browns, for example, and it will really help you to pick out which color you want to use and which color you want to paint with. Now that you've done your swatch, let's do our monochromatic mountains. Now these are going to be, we're practicing a graded wash, and then we are going to end it off with a flat wash. So you can follow along with me step by step. Choose any color you like, any one, but just one. You can only pick one color. We're only going to use that one single color, and we're not going to draw beforehand. We are just going to paint directly. You can use a nice big brush for this, use an A4 paper for this, and let's have some fun. So this is a fun way to practice. The only other thing you might need is an old hairdryer maybe, or a heat gun if you have one. I just use a hairdryer. You want each layer in between to be quite pronounced, or like that, like this one. If you don't want that, then don't dry your layers completely. If you want more of a softer look to it, or maybe a bit of a bleed, as they call it, so that you can have, so it looks like trees maybe, or something in those lines. Now, we're doing a graded wash, then we're going to let it dry, then we're doing a layer, adding more color, another layer. But as you can see here, we want to try, when we doing our graded wash, to keep some lightness into our painting so that it gives more of like a fog or misty effect as well. So follow along with me. This one is quite fun to do. I am going to choose a color. I think I'll go for this pink color again. What did I do with my brush? Let's put this out of the way. And I am going to mix up this pink. You want a light wash of this color. That means we are adding paint, but then we are adding a lot of water to it. Actually, I'm going to use a nice big brush. Okay. Adding a lot of water to it. Now let's do a graded wash, starting at the top. And I think I'll do this wet on wet. I'm going in for some clean water, and I'm painting my paper only with water. You don't have to go all the way down, as we are going to do our mountains there, and we do want some softness to it in between. So I'm just going up to here, about a third left without any water, and I'm starting at the top, and I'm doing a graded wash down. Dry my brush, get some clean water, just grade it, or just take that paint down. Just a very light wash. Now I'm going to dry it. So you can either wait for this to dry, or if you are in a bit of a rush, you can use a hair dryer or a heat gun. Let's move on to the next step. I am not adding more paint. I'm just using the paint as I have it here. So same as this mixture. And about halfway up, I am going to do my first distant mountain. So just any kind of squiggly lines that resembles a mountain. And then I am just going to level it out, and then I graded wash down. So I just let my brush run out, basically. Clean my brush, and then just adding a tiny bit of water on my brush, and then I take it down. Okay, let's let this dry, or make it dry. Now for my next layer, I am adding more paint. So I'm going over my paint again, stroking it, and then I put it in here. And as you can see, my mixture is a bit dry, so I'm just adding a tiny bit of water to this mixture as well. And I'm going in for my second layer of mountains. So you want this one to be a bit darker than the first, so make sure you have added some paint. And let's do our second mountains. Now I do want some of this softness to come through, so I'm just going to do it like this. Have them sort of go over each other. And now again, I am just doing a graded wash all the way down. Not all the way, just till your brush runs out. So So for our next layer, we do the same thing again. Add more paint, add more water, but make sure it's a darker mixture than the mountain before. And let's paint our next layer of mountains. Now your very last layer, you want it to be a highly pigmented wash. Make sure it's nice and dark, add lots of paint to it. And I'm going to do it a bit more at the bottom so that I can have some of that softness coming through. And taking it to the bottom. And then let's do like a... And then I want to do a flat wash. I am just using the last bit of my paint here, bringing it down, and then I'll just add a tiny bit of water just to finish this off. But if you have enough paint in your palette, use the remainder of your paint and make this bottom one nice and dark. An important step in watercolor painting, of course, is removing your tape. This can damage your painting and it could be irreparable, or you'll have to cut some of your painting off. So one way to make sure you get it off nicely is to heat it before you remove it. That makes the glue hot, obviously, on the tape, and that helps you to pull it off. But a very important way to do it always is to pull it at a 90-degree angle away from your painting. So this middle one, I can either pull it to the right or to the left, but at a 90-degree angle, straight to the side. And you see it's given me a nice line in between. Perfect line. That's so satisfying. I'll do that with all of these 90-degree angle. So just putting it away from your painting. Right here at the top. And this will help your painting not to be damaged. If you're just going to pull it straight, you might pull all the paper off as well. I just wanted to also show you here the difference. Do you see how big this bleed was and how much smaller this one is? Just a comparison between the two, having this one been on wet on wet and this one wet on dry. So there you have it. So task 1 was our full washes. Task 2 was for you to do a swatch. And then task 3 is these mountains, monochromatic mountains. You can do them in any color that you'd like. Now, I hope you enjoyed today, and I hope that you learned something from this lesson. I'll be back with more in the coming weeks, where we continue to our second lesson. And as I said before, there will be 12 lessons in this series, covering a whole range of all the basics that you need to know. So subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss out on any of these lessons. Enjoy your day and happy painting.